Welcome everybody to today's Intelligent Property Investor Masterclass. Great to have everybody on board. We're going to be talking this week about a number of things, one of them being the disaster derail that we've seen in the Aussie economy and what that means from a housing perspective, why we got 9 months of rain in 3 days. I've got a few interesting fact figures there for you. And, how we got smashed in southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales, and then down into southern New South Wales. It's been crazy. But what it means for property is really what I want to talk about there. How GDP struggles shrugged off Omicron and posted some great results with household spending really quite high, given everything else that was going on. And why the savings war chest is now bigger than anybody predicted. What that means, again, from an asset value and house prices. So pretty big lineup for this week's chat. If you're listening to me on any one of the podcast forums like iTunes or on Spotify, then at some stage I really want you to go across to my website and check out the charts, because I've got some crazy charts to show you this week. So let's get into this week. I don't know whether you've been on local news or anything else, but you must have been, living under a mushroom if you haven't seen some photos like this. I mean, the floods have been absolutely phenomenal. That's actually a picture of the McDonald's in Lismore, it's crazy. When we see these kind of pictures, though, it's horrible and terrific, and there's, donate money and help with the cleanup and all of those other things which we all do. But what does the aftermath really look like? Well, it's not the first time. If you go back to 2011, like places like this, Lismore, it was pretty much the same thing. It might not have been quite as high as it was this time, but it was the same thing. What happened to house prices after that? What happened to house prices after the Brisbane flood? What happened to house prices after any major catastrophe that we've had? The reality is they go back. What we might see this time is a few of the houses having a discretionary council buyback for those who just simply don't want to build in flood areas again. So we may see a little bit of that. We will certainly see zoning changes, and we're going to see building standard changes where, to build in those areas, you're going to need to come up considerably. I mean, there's some houses in Brisbane that look absolutely ridiculous because there's poles that are 6 metres out of the ground, and then the house sits on top of that, obviously in flood areas. And they're people who've lived there for all their life. They got flooded in 2011, so they raised the house, basically. And you've got these massive poles with houses sitting on them. Is that likely to be a fixture? Probably not. It's going to be the exception rather than the norm. But people will go back and they'll sit around for the next flood. It's interesting when you look at the insurances and the damage that's been done. The damage total bill this time is topping $2 billion. Making it one of Australia's most expensive natural disasters. In 2011, the Brisbane floods, in today's dollars, is almost $2.1 billion, so very, very similar. But the 1974 flood, which was the biggest one before that, in today's dollars, actually came in at $3.2 billion. So that was the really biggie. And a lot of the building standard changes and things like that have reduced the cost back by $1 billion, which is significant in today's terms. Insurance, the Insurance Council of Australia estimates has triggered more than 48,000 claims. There are already 300 million in early flood damage claims. Almost half of what Australian insurers received in the entirety of 2020 to 2021. So that's how much has already been paid out. One of our places went under. We've got a little place that I bought years and years and years ago. I was talking to my husband. This is before the floods really started to peak. And he said, "Oh, that place won't go under." He said something, "Oh, we haven't got anything in a floodplain." I said, "Well, we have. We've got the one in Gympie." And he said, "Oh, that place won't go under." I said, "Honey, it's on River Road for a reason. The street is called River Road." And previously, it had only ever gone up to under the house. It's one of those old Queenslanders, as I said, I bought it years ago. And this time it went in halfway up the cupboards. But the thing is, and we've got insurance for that, but a lot of these places haven't got insurance. Now, for instance, and I've got a sister-in-law who lives down in Ballina, and she's on the river, and she was fortunate that she was one of the 3 houses on the river that didn't actually go into her house. It went over the pool, went over the garage and everything else, but not actually into her house. Anyway, she was saying that the insurance for her to be insured was $30,000 a year for flood insurance. So she doesn't have flood insurance because the cost is prohibited. But she was also saying that the flood insurance figure for Lismore in some of those flood areas was $50,000 a year. So a lot of these places are not going to be insured, which is why it's important to, put some money into the charities that are helping out those people who simply don't have insurance. Those who've got insurance, they can either rebuild or not. They can sell their land. Most of them get paid out and they've got the land. If they don't want to rebuild, this is what happened in Brisbane. They can sell the land. A lot of them just want to walk away. It's too emotionally, huge, which means that there are actually opportunities there to buy those properties. But understand, you're in a floodplain, so it's going to flood again. And, there's lots of places around Australia that are in that category. Others will rebuild. They will use their insurance money to renovate or rebuild or whatever else and go again. The Australians are very resilient. So, but just in the figures, these figures astound me. This is Alderley there in Brisbane. We've had a year's rainfall in a matter of a couple of weeks. Wivenhoe Dam, look at that. That's the percentage full and overfull. Up to 170% capacity in a matter of weeks, and it's the disbursement of that water that is the issue. And I'm going to get on my high horse here a little bit, and we need to go back to the 50s and 40s where an internal pipeline and pumping station were all proposed to pump excess water into Central Australia. Down from the Ord River scheme, you might have heard that mentioned before. It never got off the ground because it was too much money. Well, it's a lot more money now. But when the north gets flooded, when we get flooded, being able to pump that into dams and the like runways, so creeks and rivers, man-made creeks and rivers, like the Indians did in America. That's what they did all through Colorado and through Arizona, where the rivers run. A lot of that has actually been dug out to redirect the rivers, so to have settlements in those areas. We need to do the same thing. We need to capture this water because it just goes into the ocean and gets global, water levels go up and whatever else. But so we need to start doing those things, and I think that's where a lot of the infrastructure spending actually should be looked at. So let's move off the floods, and we'll start to talk about the Aussie economy. And it's still going great guns. It really is. GDP, whilst it's a little bit choppy up and down because of the lockdowns, we're still seeing a 4.2% growth this year. Now, that's pretty good. We've had periods of time where it's been higher, but it's pretty good. If you look at this chart here, Australia's $2 trillion economy is 3% bigger than we were pre-COVID. So we took the dip, and now we're back up above that already. We're 3% above that. When you look at how much we grew just in the last quarter, we've grown basically that, our 3%, and to a total of 4.2 for 2021, which is great. It really is very good. So we're starting to pick up very, very strongly as things progress. And we'll pick up even more strongly, and this is very sad to say, and I don't mean this in any bad way, and I'm very sorry if you've got people in Ukraine, and my heart goes out to everybody over there. But the Russian-Ukrainian war actually financially benefits Australia, because Russia is very similar to Australia. They produce oil, which we don't, but where they produce coal, coking coal, thermal coal, we do. Gas, we do. Agriculture, we do. So, a lot of the things that we are very strong in from an export perspective, iron ore, we do. So all of those things means that there is a pressure on pricing, and that will continue to add more strength to the Australian economy and our balance of trade. This is how we fared across the states NT was the best. It had a 9.9% increase from pre-pandemic figures there. So, great growth for Northern Territory. And a lot of that is due to the fact that because it got into lockdown, a lot of people went to the Northern Territory and stayed there for jobs rather than do the fly-in, fly-out. That may change in the next year or so. Tassie, same thing. It went into lockdown, so it stabilised and continued to truck on down there with the force, the labour force that it had, and obviously then good growth there with its products being produced, a lot of primary production down there and wines and other things. WA, pretty good again, mining. Queensland, great. Not a lot of lockdowns, mining again. South Australia, some mining influence. ACT, just because it's the capital and a lot of public servants had, still had jobs through everything. We're averaging there at the 4.4. New South Wales and Victoria are the ones that got hit the hardest. And that is mainly due to the lockdowns. I mean, if you want to see what the effect of economically to lockdowns is, that's the effect. So to the particularly Andrews with these massive lockdowns every time somebody sneezes, but New South Wales with the last lot of lockdown there as well. So that's why those figures are lower. That will change when we start to get migration into those areas. The thing that we did was spend money on renovations. So we're all out there putting money into renovations. And stamp duty has surged since the onset of the pandemic because people are trying to buy things. So new ownership, our issue is supply, and that is why prices are still going up, because we want to get out there and buy things, but we can't. Well, we can, but we simply don't have enough stock, and that's the problem. Government expenditure is also up. You can see there the public consumption and the public investment. I'd like to see investment a whole lot bigger than that rather than just consumption. That's just chewing through money. I want to see it right up there with higher levels of infrastructure. I think the next budget is going to be a give me budget, where there's going to be some cash splash spending announced on all sorts of things, but then we've got an election straight after, so whether it ever happens or not remains to be seen. Households have been spending more on goods and less on services because, we all sort of feel life's too short and all of those other things. So we're spending money on things, internet shopping, that kind of stuff, rather than on travel, holidays. All that's starting to change now. But those sorts of things, not so much, because we've all been restricted. Households have cut back on discretionary spending. You can see there what's happened there. We're creeping back up to where we were pre-pandemic. But you can see the major lockdowns that we've had. Discretionary spending just goes totally out the window. We're starting to creep back up to the normality line there on the essentials. And I would expect that to happen from a discretionary spending as well. We've started to open up the international borders. So we're going to start to see those figures increase. About 1 in every $10 spent in the economy is private business investment. So this is about, take mining out of the picture. Non-mining has actually been very, very strong. I mean, we typically say, we're doing well because we're, a strong mining country. Well, we are, but it's actually the non-mining sector that a lot of them have done well. There's a lot of internet businesses that have, beauty industry and things like that have actually soared through the pandemic. And there's a lot of industries that have done very, very well through the pandemic. And that's really what that is showing, and increasing their capital expenditure and things like that. Export prices are close to record highs, driven by buoyant commodity pricing. The war in the Ukraine is further going to accelerate that. We are going to see more pressure on pricing there because of what's happening with the war over there. And what that means is we've got a savings war chest that is absolutely massive. The savings war chest, looks to top $372 billion in Australia. Across the world, we're talking $3.7 trillion, but in Australia, $372 billion. It's a lot of money. Look at on that chart. You can see there just how savings have increased so dramatically. so much more than we did, coming into the early part of the before the 80s, in the 70s, and then we had the spending post GFC, and then now we're turning on the spending again. Look at that. I mean, our savings have just gone through the roof with the amount of money that we've been printing. And that's flowing through to households. We have never saved this much before in recent history in Australia. It is higher than we have ever been. Over the 7 quarters since the pandemic began, Australia's households have banked an extraordinary $372 billion. That's a massive increase from the 7 quarters prior to the pandemic of $132 billion. So you can see we've more than doubled our savings in these last 7 quarters since we've been in the pandemic than we ever have before. And there's some articles came out last year about the war chest and how there is so much money. And last September we were quoting that it was $200 billion in savings in households. So we, the individuals, have saved $200 billion. But then an announcement earlier this year, oh no, it's not $200 billion, it's $250 billion. Well, it's not. Now the latest figures are showing it's $372 billion. So where is it going to go from here? And all of that means you've got upward pressure on pricing. If you have money in the bank, you're actually going backwards. Because of the increase in house pricing and inflation, your money in the bank means you are going backwards. So sitting money around at, getting your pittance on your term deposits or anything else, you're going backwards. I can't say it enough. You cannot outsave this period in history. Pouring money into savings compared to putting it into property, it's a no-brainer. But time is ticking, so you have to be taking action. So what I want you to do now is I want you to book an appointment with one of my advisors, iloverealestate.tv/questions/. They are free. They are 60 minutes long. I want you to jump on there, do it now. Because, if you dilly-dally, you'll forget, you'll this, you'll that, and you'll get back into your routine and nothing changes. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. Unless you do something different, you're going to get the same kind of results. So let's get out there and maximize this amazing period of time. It's a period of time that we haven't seen for decades. Let's get in there and maximize it. So your first thing to do here is to jump onto iloverealestate.tv/questions. Get yourself an appointment. They're free. They're 60 minutes long. Go armed with what you want, your goals, everything else, and let's see how we can help you with that. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you for listening. Bye for now, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye now.